Finally, at long last, the Star Wars 6-inch Black Series Gaming Greats Delta Squad is complete. Hey everyone, it's Rustabout Collector here, back again with another Star Wars action figure review. Today we are taking a look at the 6-inch Black Series Gaming Greats GameStop exclusive Star Wars Republic Commando SCORCH. Yeah, that's a mouthful to say when you have to include all of the different elements, but yes, this is a Star Wars Black Series release. It is a GameStop exclusive. It is part of the Gaming Greats line. It's from Star Wars Republic Commando, and it retails for about $28.99. Now, I did not pre-order this figure. I waited for release day, which was March 14th, walked into my local GameStop, and there were several on the shelves. So I think, like the previous releases, this will be a pretty easy to come by figure. It's still in stock on GameStop.com, so whatever option is more convenient for you, this should be a pretty simple figure to pick up. Very briefly, we will go over packaging here. There isn't a lot to say about it. However, we do got to talk about one thing, and it's probably the most glaring thing here. This is plastic-free packaging. Now, I don't mind the plastic-free packaging that Hasbro has been doing. I'm glad that they did not do it with the vintage collection, but it does make sense to do some type of plastic-free packaging with other lines like Black Series, Marvel Legends, etc. However, it makes no sense to do the final member of a squad in a different style of packaging than the previous releases. So you'll have Boss, Fixer, and Sev with a cutout here in a plastic window, and then you'll have this one which just has a 3D render. It's a beautiful 3D render. This is a great look at the figure and all of its detail. However, the packaging just won't match the rest of his squad. Once again, the mural artwork looks really nice. Unfortunately, as I've mentioned in previous videos, the characters to the left and to the right are not his fellow squad mates, which I think really detracts from the potential that these boxes have. Delta Squad not being released in a 4-pack was kind of the first weird choice from Hasbro in my opinion, but then not having them line up next to each other in this mural artwork piece is even weirder. Of course, on the back again, we have this render, or maybe it's a photograph. I can never really tell just because Hasbro has been doing a lot of both recently, but you get a little bit of a bio there if you want to pause and read that. And they've also added this detailed render on the side, giving you an idea of the scale of this figure since you can no longer see it in this front window pane here. Once again, the packaging isn't bad. It looks nice. It just doesn't fit with the previous ones. And I think that really detracts from really everything here. But thankfully, I'm not an inbox collector, so that will be somebody else's problem because this is literally just going to go in the trash. Now then, for the figure itself, there's actually a few nice new details included with this figure, but overall, it's going to be exactly what we've gotten before with all of the other Republic Commando molds. This figure reuses the Bad Batch Hunter mold, so of course it's going to be a little bit more animated, and the paint scheme is once again modeled after the Clone Wars, and this one in particular is actually modeled off of the slightly updated, slightly changed version that we see in the Bad Batch. So it is SCORCH, it's just animated SCORCH. It's not realistic in-game SCORCH, and that will always be okay with me for the fact that I do want an animated SCORCH in my collection, but it does not fit in a line called the Gaming Greats. I've never had a problem with these figures being more animated, more stylized, or their paint apps being based off of the Clone Wars art style. I just think they don't belong in the Gaming Greats. That's such a weird thing to put figures like this in, but you know, at the end of the day, I am glad that we are getting Republic Commandos. And this one in particular holds a lot of nostalgia for me. I've always loved SCORCH, and he was my first Republic Commando 3 3/4 inch figure to ever get. Now for accessories, he comes with his modified backpack with these large tubes coming out the top of it. I never understood what those were, but they look cool. This is painted nicely in the dark charcoal gray and yellow coloration, and that slots on there with the standard T-peg that we've seen before. So in case maybe you want to do a custom figure or something like that, you can always pop on the different backpacks from the other Commandos. He also has this all-new anti-armor DC-17, which looks really great as far as sculpting goes. It's very detailed, it's got some good paint apps, sculpt work, that sort of thing. However, like with the previous DC-17s, these almost appear to be scaled more in line with the 3 3/4 inch line than a 6-inch Black Series line. Another casualty of these being more Clone Wars based than being based on the game. Thankfully, there is a good community of 3D printer people out there that can make you a larger scaled DC-17 if you are really bothered by this type of scaling issue. Straight from the package though, he can hold it really well. course, you can get him into plenty of different dynamic poses with it and get him into, you know, a more action-oriented pose with the rest of his squad mates. And then finally, I would count this as an accessory. If nothing else, this is a newly molded part specifically for Scorch. He has extra ammunition attached to his thigh armor. This is actually a soft molded piece that is attached just loosely. It's not glued on or anything. You can't remove it unless you were able to like pop off the different joints and sockets here and then slide it off. But this is all new for him, and I'm really glad that they did that. I mean, you know, knowing the track record of some previous figures and their missing details, I could definitely see this just being completely omitted, but thankfully it's not. It's here, it's got some paint apps, it looks cool. So overall, this figure looks really good. I would say they got the colors pretty good. It is a lighter charcoal gray than it might seem in the game, but once again, I think that's a consequence of the Clone Wars being the reference point for this figure. I think it's a little bit lighter gray in the Clone Wars and a little bit darker gray in the game. But as far as paint apps go and everything of that nature, this looks really, really crisp and clean. I don't see any places where the paint apps are misaligned. This is certainly the most complex Republic Commando paint scheme that we have gotten in the Black Series. He's just in general the most complex out of the 4 squad members. There is also some pretty nice weathering going on along the edges here on his helmet and also on his torso. It doesn't feel overdone, and honestly, I think it's just a nice little touch to add to this figure's overall weathered and gritty look. Now then, for articulation, I'll go over this really quickly, but once again, if you have the Hunter figure, if you have Crosshair, if you have any of the other Republic Commandos, it's the same mold. It is all the same mold, and honestly, apart from the inaccuracies, it's a really solid mold as far as articulation goes. Up at the head, you have a double ball joint, so you get some side-to-side tilt, forward and back. You can swivel the arms all the way around, and those shoulder pads are on a little bit of a plastic loop around the peg, so those actually travel with the arm as long as you're holding it all as one piece. The shoulders can hinge all the way up to there. Again, that shoulder pad is just free floating, so it'll just kind of move with the arm. The single jointed elbows can crunch into just past 90, and they can also pivot side to side. There's a hinge and swivel at the wrist, so all the way around, in and out on the left hand, up and down on the right hand. Ball joint at the torso gives a really wide range of motion just because of the way the armor is cut there. Ball joint and thigh swivel lets you pivot the leg forward, and then the single jointed knees allow you to pivot that leg down to there, and you can move that side to side, giving you a really nice and convincing kneeling position from this mold. And then of course down to the foot you have a hinge and rocker, so you can hinge it back to there before it impacts the shin armor, and then forward to there, and of course side to side rocking. So overall, I still have to stick with what I said when I originally reviewed Boss back there. This figure is really solid. The articulation is a great basis for just action poses and really fun movements. The paint scheme, sculpt work, the weathering, it's all really, really nicely done here. In fact, there's even molded in scratches and damage to the armor, but that is going to be the same across all of these figures because, again, it's the same mold, so they will all have the same little scratches and nicks in the same place on their armor. But I still stand by what I said before. This is a really fun clone trooper mold. I know it's not accurate, and there are plenty of people online that could go on long rants about every little detail that isn't correct, and to a point I'd say that they're right. I think Black Series has done a great job of being a very highly detailed, highly sculpted line, and the fact that these are not realistic styled Republic Commandos is kind of a poor choice from Hasbro when it comes to making accurate, detailed figures, especially in a line called the Gaming Greats. However, looking at this as a piece of plastic, as an action figure, as kind of really a toy. I know it's a collectible, but it's a toy at the end of the day. This is a very, very fun clone trooper toy. It poses really nicely, it looks really cool, it has a certain coolness factor, which I think Republic Commandos kind of innately have, but turned into a plastic action figure by Hasbro here, it works really well. And while his deco may not be completely accurate, I really do think they captured the look of Scorch pretty well here, especially considering that this is the animated style and not the more realistic style we see here on the 3 3/4 inch version. But even with that being the case, I'd say that the differences are pretty minute between them. I can see why the differences do bother people, but I still do think that this is a pretty good representation of the character, especially when you consider that some folks just want a Scorch or a Republic Commando in their collection, and they don't want to pay the outrageous amount that the 3 3/4 inch versions typically go for these days. It's my personal hope that Hasbro will do a more realistic and updated version of the Black Series figure, and that they'll also do a more updated version of the 3 3/4 inch version in the vintage collection someday. But until that day, this is what we have, and I'd say it works pretty well as a representation of the character. Again, it's not perfect. I will never say that it's perfect, but I will say that it's pretty good. I will say I'm not a fan of the price increase at $28.99. This doesn't feel very premium. This doesn't feel super worth it in that department, especially because a lot of this is reuse and just repaint. I would really like to see all of these squad members closer to the $22 to $25 mark. So I'm not trying to give Hasbro a free pass here or anything with these Republic Commando figures, and likewise the Bad Batch figures. But at the end of the day, we are talking about plastic action figures and toys, and I think that these actually do a good job of making good toys, good action figures, fun action figures, and especially fun clone trooper action figures. The two biggest drawbacks I feel like with these figures have to be the downsized weapons and the price point. For what they are, they feel really good, again, at that like $22 to $25 price point. However, I have seen several GameStops clearancing out Boss, and even on GameStop's website, Boss has been marked down several times. So if you just kind of play the waiting game, if you're not willing to pay that $28 price point for something like Scorch, eventually I think you could get all of these for $20 or less. But that just comes down to whether you're willing to wait that long or not. Personally, I like these figures enough to pick them up as they are at that price point. But then again, I don't collect every Black Series figure ever, so picking up 4 figures at a bit of a higher price point balances out with the fact that I'm not going to go out and buy a bunch of other characters from the Star Wars franchise in the 6-inch Black Series style. I do have to admit though, I did pick up one of the Republic Commando battle droids, just because this design is so iconic to the game, and I feel like it'd be fun to have all 4 of the Republic Commandos on the shelf with at least one of these guys getting kind of pummeled by them. I'm sure that these figures will also go on clearance because the droids just don't seem to sell that well, especially the Gaming Greats droids. There's a lot of the Imperial Enforcer droids and the Battlefront 2 heavy droids at my local GameStop that I'm sure will be clearance soon, so in 6 months' time, I think that these will be also. I won't be doing a review on this figure or anything, I just thought it was worth mentioning that if you pick up Scorch, you can also pick up an enemy for Scorch to, you know, blow up or something. I think eventually I will be weathering all the rest of these guys the way that I did with Boss here, just to give them more battle-worn texture and kind of doing like a paint wash to bring out some of those sculpt details that I mentioned before. But even if you don't do that and you just keep them as they are out of the box, I think they look really, really nice as animated Clone Wars style Republic Commando figures. But anyways, I've gone on long enough, so if you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, leaving a like down on this video, and letting me know your thoughts on these Republic Commando figures down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what other people in the community are kind of feeling with this animated, realistic, mismatched style that they've gone with. As always, there's a link down in the description to my Instagram where I post toy photography, and also, like, you know, when something like this goes live for pre-order, I will post that in my story so that you all have a chance to get it. But thank you all so much for watching. If you made it this far in the video, have a wonderful evening, noon, or night, depending on when you're watching this video, of course. And as always, I'll be sure to catch you all in the next video.